How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Tap Theory, and today I want to talk to you guys about scales. So when I say scales, I don't mean the things that you're supposed to stand on that let you know how much you're supposed to hate yourself that month. What I'm talking about are the groupings of notes that lead to very familiar sounds. You know, the major scale and the minor scale, the pentatonic scale, all that kind of thing. It's when we say that, we're talking about the way notes are collected together to make for familiar sounds. So let's break a little bit of that mumbo jumbo down. So when I say a collection of notes, I'm skipping a couple of steps. The very first step is the chromatic scale, or, you know, all 12 of the notes in the Western scale, excuse me, the Western music schematic, right? And you can think about it as C to C, all the white notes and all the black notes on a piano, right? And it sounds like this. That's the chromatic scale. Now, when we talk about scales like the major or the minor scales, it's talking about the way certain notes out of that chromatic scale are excluded. So, when we talk about a major scale, then we basically got step relationships, right? So you've got two different types of steps. You've got a half step, which is one fret to the next, or, you know, almost all the way back down one quadrant. And then you've got a whole step, which is two frets, or, you know, one fret closer than the half step on two different strings, right? So a major scale, or any scale really that isn't the chromatic scale, is built up on a relationship of whole steps and half steps. With the major scale, the formula is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So we're starting here. I'm starting right on the dot. For me, that's B. For other tunings, it might be different, but just for a good reference point, I'm right at the start of the second quadrant. So here's our first note, and then we go a whole step, and then another whole step, excuse me, then a half step, then another whole step again, and then finally a half step. Nice and quick. And that is the relationship of a major scale. Now, to look at a minor scale, it's a little bit different. Starting right again at the start of the second quadrant, you got whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, and finally whole step. But Josh, what about the rest of the neck? That is a very good question, strange man wearing an octopus mask. So what you're getting at, essentially, is called the modes. So the idea of the modes is that all of the notes in the major scale are happening all over the place, wherever there happens to be, you know, the same note on the neck due to redundancy or different octaves, things like that. Essentially, the modes are a way to shrink the bigger picture down into something smaller and more digestible, much like all 5 forms of the pentatonic scale. Now, the technical definition of a mode is the major scale, but starting and ending, or having the emphasis on a different note. So when you look at a major scale, or any scale for that matter, you have what's called scale degrees, right? And that basically tells you what note in the scale you're focusing on. So the first note in the scale, the tonic, would be 1. Second note is 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1. And we can refer to, you know, if I say, okay, play me 5 in C major, you're going to find C, and then go up to the 5th note in the C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that happens to be G. So the modes are essentially just a major scale starting and stopping, or having the emphasis on a different scale degree of the scale. So if we were in C major and you wanted to play D Dorian, you would play all the notes in C major, but you would focus on the D. Like that. You might know that from, a lot of jazz guys use Dorian a lot. The third mode is called Phrygian. That starts up on, like I said, the third scale degree of the major scale, or the Ionian mode. Next we have Lydian, built off of the fourth scale degree. And then Mixolydian, which is built off of the fifth scale degree. Then Aeolian, or the natural minor mode, which is built off of the sixth scale degree of the Ionian mode. And finally, we've got Locrian, which is built off of the seventh scale degree. And you can hear, here's the focus of the Locrian mode, right, is that the seventh scale degree, but it just wants you to resolve back to the one. It just calls for that. So each one of these modes has a different set of interval relationships, right? So when I talked about the major scale, I gave you a series of whole steps and half steps, and each one of those is a little bit different. Now, when we talk about scale degrees, just blanket scale degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with no sharps or flats tells you that it's a major scale. That automatically tells you whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, right? So what you do to kind of adjust for the modes, because you can look at modal degrees as well, and both of these will be in the charts that go along with this video. When you look at modal degrees, you basically add a sharp or a flat to the notes that you want to adjust. So if the major scale, or the Ionian mode, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Dorian mode, looking at the modal degrees, even though it's basically 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2 against the Ionian mode. When we look at the modal degrees as Dorian as its own focus, or its own scale, then we get 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. So, as we can see here, our major scale, or the Ionian mode, is made up of a whole step, which again is 2 frets, whole step, a half step, which is either 1 fret or 4 frets back, another whole step, which is either 2 frets up or 3 frets back onto the next string, and then a half step again, and we're back to the root, right? And so this is how we look at scale degrees. A scale degree is basically what note in the scale you're on. So the home note, or the root, is 1, and then you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're back to 1. And when you have a completely unaltered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like that, that tells you that it is whole step, half step, whole step, half step, right? Now, if you're looking at a different mode, you've got the Dorian mode here, and it's telling you 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. That just means that this note got moved back to here, and this note got moved back to here, as you can see. 1, 2, flat 3, or whole step, half step, and then 4 is a whole step, 5 is a whole step, 6 is a whole step, half step up to 7, flat 7, and then we're back to 1. Now the yellow dots here are the modal root, and I put in the white dots to show you where it is on the major scale, right? Because really this is 2, 3, 4, which really goes back up there, but if we imagine it could go right there, 5, 6, 7, and 1 again, on the major scale. Now remember, we can look at it modally, and I know this is confusing. It just depends on where your focus is. If you're looking at it as the focus being 2, you're making that Dorian sound, that minor scale with the natural sixth sound that blues guys and jazz guys use all the time, then you're looking at it modally. If you're trying to figure out where you are in the major scale, then you're looking at it scalarly, right? I know this stuff can be, oh God, thank God I'm recording, oh my God. I know this stuff can be really confusing, so a good way that helped me think about it when I was first learning this stuff was to think of like a luggage bag conveyor belt, right? At the airport or something like that. You've got, bags on it, and you're looking at different bags that pass you and keep circling around, but it's all the same conveyor belt. You might be looking at different parts of the conveyor belt, but it's all the same belt, and then eventually it loops back around. And that's essentially what's going on with the major scale and all of the modes. It's all it's all part of the same scale. It's all part of the same thing. It's just a different way to look at it. So let's talk about the shapes of these, right? So the treble side shapes are pretty much always going to be 3 notes per string. You'll edit the actual notes depending on the interval relationship, but you can take these shapes and move them all around up and down the neck. So the major scale shape is going to be, like I said earlier, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now we're at the octave, and then it's just going to repeat that same thing. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And you will edit that based on what mode you're playing and what part of the neck you're playing on, and the interval relationships for where you're at. Pretty standard fare. With the bass side, because of the tuning in fifths, you're going to have to do a 4 note per string shape to get everything linear, right? So if we're down here, it's going to be whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, and then so on and so forth, right? And again, you'll edit the notes depending on what mode you're in. If you're in the natural minor mode, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is whole step, half step, whole step, half step, you'll have 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, which is going to be whole step, half step, half step, whole step, right? Again, I know it's a lot. Just go check out the charts. It's got all the shapes in there for you. Now, thanks to the tuning in the bass side, that 2-string octave shape, the quadrant octave shape, still applies, because that's the relationship of the tuning. And so we can do a 2-note per string, or sorry, a 4-note per string 2-string octave, similar to with the pentatonic scales we did a 3-note per string 2-string octave. I think this quadrant octave thing in the bass side is awesome, because I think it's a really easy way to visualize the relationship of all of the notes, right? The first half of the scale is right there, and then that's the 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can finish out the scale. Kind of helps you cut the scale in half to see the relationships between the notes in a bit of a more easy to manage chunk. Another cool trick, thanks to the tuning, just like anything else, is that you can put the same shapes on one side onto the other and have them still be applicable. And thanks to the octave displacement, it'll always yield a different and interesting sound. So now that you've got a grasp on the scales and modes, I hope, and I hope you let me know if you're confused about things, I want you to take these and start exploring them, right? Scales are information. These shapes are all just, ones and zeros on the fretboard, basically. And playing your scales up and down is a good way to learn them, but a bad way to use them musically, in my opinion. I am going to get into this in my Scales into Lines video, but I like to think of the scales as, you know, crossing a stream, stepping stones on a river as you cross a stream, right? You're trying to go from one place to the next, right? Let's say from octave to octave. And instead of crossing every stream, instead of stepping on every stone while you cross, try and find a fun pathway to get through them. You know, I'm not just going, that's a scale. I'm jumping around on notes, I'm replaying certain notes. Right, I'm taking rhythmic patterns and spreading them out across the scale, and then, you know, finally I wind up at my destination. Like that. So the same goes for, you know, the bass side. If I've got, you know, kind of a minor tonality that I want to play around with, I've got my destination note, which is, you know, in this case, the 1. And then I've got these 6 other notes that I can go to kind of, you know, jump around from in a way that makes the 1 sound more interesting than just going up and down the scale. So that's pretty much it for scales. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you're confused about anything, and I'll be happy to clear things up. There's going to be exercises and charts with you know, all of the scale shapes on them and stuff like that. So take these, try them out, try and see how they connect together. Like I said, each mode is just a different part of the same conveyor belt, right? And cool, yeah, keep exploring.